Chapter 14, Dynasty 20. Ra Masu Hak On. From about 1200 BCE. So Ramses III, as this king's official name was Usur Ma'at Ra, he is only distinguished from Ra Usur Ma'at Snoopin. By the title of Hak On, Prince of Heliopolis. According to the name, he bore the appellation of Ra Masu Pa Neptur, that is Ramses the god, from which the Greeks formed the well-known name of Rampsinitus. The miserable state of Egypt before his accession could not be better described than in his own words, cited in the last chapter. The same Harris Papyrus gives a comprehensive outline of the eventful life of Ra-Masu III, the following being the chief events. The king's first care after his accession was the restoration of the demarcation of the several castes, which he arranged in their descending degrees as follows. The Ab and Pra'a, the counselors of Pharaoh, an office which Joseph held in the high Egyptian court. The great princes, governors, and representatives of the king in several nomes. The infantry and the chariot soldiers, the mercenaries of the tribes of Shardana and the Kahak, and the lowest classes of the officers and servants. He was next occupied with the wars against the foreign nations who had invaded the borders of Egypt. The Danau were pursued to the Sicilian coast and there defeated. So in Cyprus were the Zakaru, Zagrata, otherwise known as, and the Prusatha, Prasadita, while the Caucasian Sardanas, and the Asha Ascetes, on the other hand, were exterminated in their settlements west of the Delta and transplanted to Egypt in great masses. With their families, they were compelled to settle in Aramseum and to pay every year, according to the custom of the country, a tribute of woven stuffs and corn to the temples of Egypt. You know, corn is in kernels. And so the queens and high priestesses of even of Thebes have, you know, less generations than the males, apparently. Netem, Thanayaman, Hunt, to Awi, Issa Keb, Kirma'at, and Yemen Ereti, Chepen Apet, Nilakar, An Kanusa, Nefer Yibra. The term vassal designates the petty kings and the satraps of Egypt. were conquered by King Meryem Pianka. So this is smaller print, so this is going to take longer to share the chart. But the family of the 10th dynasty, the king Ra-Masu the 13th, and his son Ra-Masu the 14th, and his son Ra-Masu the 15th, and Pen Rahenia or Tala Masu. But we have King Ra-Masu the 16th, daughter unknown, and a daughter unknown, but we'll get to that after. So the prince Takhar of Unks, a princess Te Unk Anna Uns Unk, and a commander-in-chief Nimroth. But a daughter of Ramasu the 15th with King Meryem Pebamkadhu the first. And his brother, the high priest of Yemen, Menkipra Issa Imkeb. But their parent was the queen Dian Hatar Hentauf, and the king and high priest of Yemen, Meryem Pathethan, and the generation before that was Queen Thentyemen and King Pianka, and before that was the family of the 11th dynasty of Thebes and Tania. Okay, this is the dynasty here. King and high priest of Yemen, Hahor, the queen, Neptum. So from the high priest of Yemen, Menkipra and Issa Mkeb, we have the high king and priest of Yemen, Meryem Pathethan, the second, Meryem Hor. Oh, this is too small print for a facsimile edition. Mr. Hanu the second, and also Ka Ra Ma'at Jashunt the first was the king. So we have the king of Ma, Nimrod, who was the parent, the generation before that, the Nimroth and Thent Sepik, and before that, the king of Ma, Ma, Shashank, and Mehet and Usak, the prince of Ma, Bethut, the prince of the Ma, Nebe Nashu, the prince of the Ma, Man-Asu, and before that we have Dehen, Ba'ue, U'a, and so we have a princess of the other lineage. The lineage combines again there with the Kara Ma'at, Uwa, Arkin the first, and Tashet Khansu. Output was the high priest of Yemen and governor of Patoris. And so from the king and Ta'ahat Conan, we have the king Takleth the first and Kepus. From them we have the king Mut-an-Anks and Webken the second, with Ka-Ra Ma'at and Esa M. Heb. And okay, the high priests of Yemen are Nimroth, and this lineage, in Heracleopolis, well, at least what we're seeing here is a Mut M Het Emet Noram Mat, and the 23rd dynasty of Tennis and Thebes. The king and high priest of Yemen, Mere Ams Ubek Athent, was a vassal. The high priest of Yemen from that generation, Nasta Ut Khut Shashank, the prophet of Yemen, Isakrem, prophet of Yemen, Horam Est. But that seems to be where that line comes to an end. So we go over Prince Shashank. The next generation is Setrath Taleh with Princess Des Bastpur. And giving birth to Setrap, Petata Ta'ari, and Hers. And there's, from that we have Satrap. Petop Bast is a vassal. Tekeleth. Heren Esse with Tatehor. And we don't know with Kepus Issa. Issa Irib Bastuts. But the generation before that, on that side, we have King Rudamen the First, who some queen, and Akal was the queen, and then from them you got the king Teharaka, Queen Yemen Tikahat, Yemen Eretis on the side, and we have King Rudamen II, Shepenpet. Oh, okay. That's where that ends, but Capus Este Erasatel, we also have the generation of Anxpa Essa Takaleth, a princess with a ba and a ban in it, whose child was Pet Yemen Noob Owen Tana. And the generation before that was the Takaleth, the Remesu Tatehor. Okay, I went over that. So we go back here to Pish Ut Akaf Tamakfet who's the princess. So same generation as Satrap Dekaleth. And from them we have How Ta Na Ka Kem. And Ta Em Hor Patet Tetus from that. Satrap, the first was that other name for that king. Haupta was the next generation, and Pa Senhor. And to go back 2 generations, we have the family of the 24th and the 26th dynasty in Saul's in Memphis. We have the king Tefnecht. From that, we have the king Nebapeo and the king Kenneth or Satrap. And from that, we have from that generation 2 people, we have King Neku the first, Satrap, and Tef next, also a satrap. And okay. And then we go back a couple generations, the family of the 25th dynasty, Upis. From them we have the king Yemen, Pianka, King Mary Yemen Nut, the king Pianka. So 4 generations listed there. But from the king Mary Yemen Pianka, we also have the king Shippenapet with Kakta, and then the generation of the king Shabak and Yemen Eratia. And we go to the generation, the Shabbatan. But from Yemen Eratiris, we have the next branch off of the generations here. We have the princess Mut Erathis with Pet Yemen Na, whose children Ax, Shippenapet, Ushabra, and Pasenthek, so Ta, Oakbast. And from them we have the prophet Apta Pet Nia. And from them we have Shashank and Queen Dhanakata. But we have that same generation of, the king Ahames Senut, and his queen was, so we have the princess Tanat Issa from that, the prince and king Basan, then the third from the first king and the queen here. But from the queen next to Basaku, we have the commander of the troops, Ahmes, and the princess, the prince, Pasen Hansen. And so we go over to the Marineh. There seems to be a gap. King Shashank IV, Eretron. But before that, we had King Pamat, so Satrap, King Shashank III, a vassal, King Tahalet II, Queen Set Yemen, same generation as Mut Hat, Memut, Kromamat. But before that, we have King Shashank II and the King and High Priest of Yemen, Murray Yemen Shashank, which you skip a generation. and the king's grandson, Mentuhotep, with Ta Ma'at. Their child was Te Bata Uaf Ankh. And with him, there's a contents. Okay. I think I've reached the end of that portion there. On the east, the king achieved a like success against the Sahar. A branch of the Shasu, he plundered their tents, seized their possessions and cattle, and carried off the people as prisoners to Egypt. A war was next kindled by the Libyans, Hamaxius, who, as before under Meneptah II, how do you say Meneptah? We have Yemen Ra, Mu, Na, Yahyin, okay, made inroad in to the delta and occupied the whole country on the left bank of the Canopic branch of the Nile, from Memphis as far as Carbana, Canopus. Near the latter place, along the seashore, lay the district of Galtat, the cities of which they had held for many years. There and their allies were defeated by the Pharaoh, and among the latter the king mentions by name the Aspeta, the Asbaitya, the Kasha, the Caucasians, the Sha'ap, who could not be more closely defined, the Hassa, Alces, the Bakana, Bakaloi, the king of Libu. His family and people, together with their herds, were transported as captives to Egypt, while some were placed in the fortified Ramsia, and others branded with hot iron in the name of the king as sailors. A magnificent gift was made of their herds to the temple of Yemen at Thebes for the protection of the frontier towards Suez. The king built a great wall in the country of Eperiu and surrounded with strong defenses, whose walls had a height of 52.5 feet. In the harbor of Suez, Ramasu III built a fleet of large and small ships on purpose to make voyages to the Red Sea, to the coast of Punt, and the Holy Land, to bring back the costly productions of those distant regions, especially incense. Now, Tatwe, oh, well, that's a separate point from somewhere else. But anyways, the Egyptians had a place where they would go, and the ancient Israelites considered this one place to be the Holy Land, it appears. But it was still in the land of Egypt. Connected with these objects was the establishing of commercial relations with those coasts, and a caravan trade by land was started on the road from Qasr to Coptus on the Nile. In a word, Ratmasu, the third, opened direct intercourse by land and sea with the shores of the Indian Ocean, which in latter times was renewed by the Ptolemies. Not less important was the dispatch of a mission by land to the copper mines of Akita, and the metal shining like gold, and in the form of bricks, was brought home from the smelting houses in those parts. The king also turned his attention anew to the treasures of the peninsula of the Sinai, which, from the times of Sneferu, had appeared to the Egyptians so desirable. Laden with rich presents for the temple of Hathor, protectress of the Mafkat Peninsula, distinguished officials went thither to bring back the much prized greenish blue, copper stone. Throughout Egypt, Ramessu planted trees and shrubs to give its inhabitants rest under the cool shade. Rampsinitus concludes by extolling the peaceful condition of the whole country, in which the weakest woman could travel unmolested on all the roads. The Shardana and the Kahak remained quietly in their cities, and Kush and the Phoenicians had ceased to annoy Egypt with their attacks. Finally, in the 32nd year of his reign, the king recommends his son, Ramessu IV, whom he had made joint king with himself, to the recognition and obedience of his subjects. It is quite possible to fill in the general outline of Ramessu III's reign with more definite facts supplied by the Ramesseum, which was turned from a treasure house into a complete temple of victory. Today, pictures and words alone replace the treasures which were once stored there and dedicated by Rampsinitus to Yemen-Ra. Golden grains up to the weight of 1,000 pounds from the mines of Amamu in the land of Kush, of Edfu, of Ambas, and of Coptus. Bars of silver, whose pyramids of blue and green stones beside the much prized blue stone of Tafrer and the real green stone of Rashatha, copper ore, lead, precious sorts of incense from Punt and from the Holy Land, moreover, gold and silver statues, images of animals and vases, chests, and other ornaments, down to the seal rings with the name of the king upon them. All these and many other things did the pharaoh dedicate to the entity in this address. I dedicate this to thee as a memorial for thy temple, constituting of clear raw copper and raw gold and of all works of art which have come forth from the workshops of the sculptor. The productions of the land of Ruthen shall be brought to thee as gifts, to fill the treasury of thy temple with the best things of all lands. Again, thou hast received gold and silver, like sand on the seashore, what thou hast created in the river and in the mountain, that I dedicate to thee by heaps upon the earth, let it be an adornment for thy majesty forever. I offer to thee blue and green precious stones, and all kinds of jewels, in chests of bright copper. I have made for thee numberless talismans of all kinds of valuable precious stones. Ramessu III must have enjoyed enormous wealth, which he lavished on the temples of Yemen-Ptah and Ra of Heliopolis. When he came to the throne, things looked bad for Egypt. The hostile Asiatics and Tuhanu robbers, the Libyan Marmidah, showed themselves only to the injured state of Egypt. The land lay open before them in weakness since the time of the earlier kings. It did evil to the entities as well as to the men. They considered things to be God and still did evil in regard to them. No one had so strong an arm as to oppose them, on account of their hostile intentions. In the 5th year of his reign, the enemies prepared a fresh attack from the west. The people of Tamahu assembled together in one place. The tribes of the Maxias prepared themselves for a raid out of their own country. The leaders of their warriors had confidence in their plans. As in former times, the Libyans were the prime movers of hostilities, so now their kings, Zamar and Zautmar, appear as instigators and leaders in battle. The defeat of the enemy was tremendous. 3 years after this event, a warlike movement broke out in the north, caused by the migration of the Carian and Colchian tribes. But they were at last utterly routed in a naval engagement at Migdol, at the mouth of the Palisaic branch of the Nile. The inscriptions of the Temple of Victory thus relate the story. A quivering knot of fear seized the people in their limbs. They, the invaders, came up, leaping from their coasts and islands, and spread themselves all at once over the lands. No people stood before their arms, beginning with the people of Kheta, of Kadi, and Carchemish, Uradus, and Elus. They wasted these countries and pitched a camp at one place in the land of the Amorites. They plundered the inhabitants and the territory as if they had been nothing. And they came on against Egypt, but there was held in readiness a fiery furnace before their countenance on the side of Egypt. Their home was in the land of Prosatha, the Sakar, the Shekalsha, the Danau, and the Uash. These nations had leagued together. They laid their hand on the double land of Egypt to encircle the land. Their heart was full of confidence. They were full of plans. This happened since was the will of the entity, the Lord of those considered to be gods, human Thebes. An ambush was prepared to take him in the snare like birds. He gave me strength and granted success to my plans. My arm was strong as iron when I broke forth. And to show you the see, this is what I started with. It's a facsimile edition, so if it had been redone, I think they would have made it more visible. Larger print so you can read it.